Okay, so I'd like to know how many people think they're going to be happy when they finish this course? You can just give me a thumbs up on, yeah, okay. So 1, 2. How many people think they're going to be happy when they're finished their degree? Okay, everybody. And how many people think they're going to be happy when they get married or they have a baby or they have another baby? Who's going to be happy there? Yeah, lots of people again, lots of hands. All right. And how many people are going to be happy when they immigrate to Canada? Or when they return to, yeah, okay, lots of thumbs up there. The only problem with all of those statements is that we're waiting for something to happen to be happy. And this is the way I used to always state things in my life. Well, it's a difficult time now, but I'll be happy when I'm done this, or I'll be happy when this happens, or I'll be happy when I buy myself a new something. And the issue is that that is just saying we're not allowing ourselves to be happy now. So today's presentation is going to give you the tips to be able to be happy now and not delay for those benchmarks in our life. Because I can tell you that all of those benchmarks will make you happy for a while, but all of it is fleeting if you don't have the next skill already figured out. So today's presentation is the most important conversation that you never heard out loud. It's an introduction to self-help, self-talk, and instant happiness. What we're going to go over today are the 6 different types of communication, and then a focus on self-talk, both negative and positive. And then we'll go into what the research says about how it can make you happier and healthier and more resilient in life. Then we'll discuss worrying and how useful that is a little bit. I'll give you some of my mantras or positive affirmations. And then I'll sum up with a how to put it into practice and summary slide. To start, there are 6 basic types of communication. And usually when I'm brought in to speak to audiences or to companies, I'm there to talk about just one of these 6 types. And it's usually the small meetings or small group communication. So in other words, how do we make our meetings the most effective? How do we ensure that our communication in teams is as efficient and effective as possible? Other times I can be brought in to teach someone how to do public speaking or media training. In other instances, I'm teaching people how to deal with difficult conversations. How do you do a performance evaluation one-on-one and deliver feedback in a constructive manner? Other times, it's a one-on-one conversation where it's the intrapersonal. And this is what I want to focus on today, because to me, this one is not only the most life-changing personally and professionally, but it really unlocked a key in my life. Now, with each one of these types of conversation, though, there's common threads. To have any form of effective communication, you need 4 elements. You need your communication to be very clear and concise. You need it to have a message. And most importantly, and we're going to focus a lot on this one today, your communication has to be respectful and not impact anyone's self-esteem negatively. So the question I have to ask you then is, your communication when you're talking to people might be concise, clear, have a message, and be respectful. But what about when you're talking to yourself? What about those things you're saying in your own head? Is your self-talk effective communication? So we have to ask ourselves, when we're facing a challenge, maybe you're about to do a presentation and you're nervous. Why are you nervous? What are the voices in your head saying? Do you have someone saying, oh, this presentation is going to be great. You're going to do a great job. Or do you have someone in your head saying, you're not good at public speaking. Public speaking makes you feel horrible inside. Public speaking is one of the worst fears that I have. Do you hear someone even more negative than that? Do you hear someone saying, you're going to fail? This is going to go terribly. I don't know if anyone can relate with any of these negative self-talk items, but for me, I found I had voices of people from the past in my head. I had parents, ex-boyfriends, friends from different times in my life, bosses, colleagues, anything that someone had said to me that was negative, I was internalizing and then was repeating back in different areas of my life later, which meant I was becoming my own inner monster or inner demon. I wasn't being a cheerleader to myself. Can anybody relate to that kind of negative self-talk where you're putting yourself down sometimes even before you start talking? Yeah, thank you for putting your hands up. Yeah, and this is why I created this presentation, because I was sabotaging my own happiness. And so I wanted to learn myself, how do I stop this? And what tools are out there to help me with this? And that's how this presentation was born. And since then, I've delivered it to all kinds of groups all over the place. And this part of my communication presentation is always everyone's favorite part. So I decided, you know what? Let's just carve it out and do a presentation just on this. Here's our starting point. The research says that 70% of our self-talk is negative. Now think about that for a second. That means that 70% of the messages that are rolling around in our brains on a daily basis are negative. How can we be happy and healthy if every day we've got this negative voice 70% of the time? Then we have to ask ourselves, whose words are they? Is it someone from our past that used to be very critical of us? For me, I had an ex-boyfriend from over 30 years ago whose words were still impacting me in my current day, telling me I wasn't I wasn't beautiful enough. I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't kind enough. There was all these. The bottom line message was I wasn't enough. And every time I faced a challenge, I left the room or left the situation feeling I wasn't good enough. Now, they say that if for emotional intelligence and for our own growth and personal and professional development, we have to be self-aware. So there's where we need to figure out whose voice is it? And also check in just for a day. Think about everything you're saying to yourself. And you could even write it down in 2 columns. How much of it is positive and how much of it is negative? And if you're anywhere near this 70-30 split or higher, which is where I found myself, it's time to take action and reclaim your own mental health in the most fundamental way by changing what you are saying to yourself. You need to take back your power. And one of the first things I did is I asked myself, if my daughter was in the same situation, would I say to her out loud what I'm saying to myself in my own brain? And the answer was a resounding no. I would never be that cruel. So that was a really interesting indication for me. I needed to replace cruelty in my head with kindness for myself. And we're going to talk more about that in a couple of minutes, called self-compassion and what the resulting benefits are if we can do that. Now, we move to where we want to be. We want to focus on positive self-talk, because just by changing the words we say to ourselves, we can change our life right now. I was in a very dark place a few years ago. And in my life since then, I have the same job. I have the same relationship status. I have the same children, the same pet. Not that much has changed in my life on the outside. But what I did change was I learned about positive self-talk. And my whole life is different now. My outlook on life is different. My level of happiness and satisfaction with life is different now. I decided to take control. And now I don't look at things as you win or you lose. I look at it, excuse me, as succeeding or learning. Nothing is a failure anymore unless I haven't learned from it. So if things don't go my way, I'll show you some of my skills of what I do. But the first thing I do is I tell myself, what are you going to learn from this? And how are you not going to repeat it? So there we go. We have to be our own cheerleader. We have to be our own positive champion. And like the image shows here on the slide, we have to be our own inner lion. And we do this because we have to be friends with ourselves. Because if we're not friends with ourselves, how can we be a friend to anyone else? These two quotes and this one book cover helped me understand the process. If everything begins and ends in your mind, that means that whatever we give power to has power over us. And if that's the case, I can't live with 70% of my power going to negativity. That was the everything's got to change moment for me. And if we go back to Henry Ford, who was the founder and president of Ford Motor Company, he said, whether you think you can or can't, you're right. So why not be your own inner cheerleader? It's funny because growing up, there was this book, and it was called The Little Engine That Could. And you may or may not know this story, but I'm going to give you a quick summary of the story. There was a village and the main rail line was cut off, and so supplies weren't getting to the village. There was an alternate route, but it was over a very, very steep mountain. And the big, shiny rail cars tried to go up the mountain, and they couldn't do it. The first one tried. The second one tried. The third one tried. The strongest of all tried. And none of them could make it up. And then there was this one tiny little engine. And everyone was laughing at it. It was small. It was old. It didn't look very pretty. But the little engine said to itself, I think I can. I think I can. I think I can. And it started heading up the hill. And as it was going up the hill, it was gaining momentum. And it was saying, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. And it made it up and over the hill and was the hero of the day. And it brought the supplies into the village on the other side of the mountain. It's so strange looking back on reading this book as a child. I had the messages that I needed, even from childhood, to be able to utilize positive self-talk, but I still hadn't grasped the concept and applied it in my own life. So maybe if you're a parent, you'll want to get a copy of this book for your children to try and teach them these messages and what that means in life. I mentioned earlier that most of my self-talk revolved around not being enough, not being good enough for my dad to be proud of me, not being beautiful enough for the man I was dating to still want to be with me, not kind enough to be considered for a charity award, not always not enough, not smart enough to get the mark I wanted on the exam, to get the scholarship that I wanted, not blank enough. And I won't ask you what your blank is, because you might have one, you might have two, you might have 10. But I'm hoping that a little bit of information from Marissa Peer will help you with this understanding that you are enough. You've always been enough, and you will always be enough. So Marissa Peer, I've put the link to my favorite of her videos at the bottom of this screen if you want to watch it after this presentation. It's 42 minutes, and for me, it was 42 minutes that changed my life. If you don't have 42 minutes, let me summarize it for you. The first thing she says is that your mind will listen to whatever you tell it. So if you tell it something positive, it's going to listen to that. If you tell it something negative, it's going to listen to that. If you tell it something healthy, it'll listen. If you tell it something unhealthy, it'll listen. I'll give you a very quick example of this. When I was growing up and I was in university and I was in exam time, I would always say to myself, don't get sick, don't get sick, don't get sick. But what was interesting is I kept repeating the word sick. And inevitably, because I was so run down, I might have been cramming a little bit, late nights, not a lot of sleep. Inevitably, I would get sick. So I thought, okay, how do we change that sentence to a positive? And now I say, stay healthy, stay healthy, stay healthy. I've eliminated the negative word in the sentence so that I don't focus on that item. All right, so that was the first thing. Whatever you tell your mind, it's going to believe it. The second thing we need to know, and this comes through in multiple studies I'm going to show you today, but the major cause of depression isn't what's going on in our lives, it's what's going on in our minds. The major cause of depression is those words, those harsh, hurtful, critical words that we're saying to ourselves. The third thing she has in her video is she basically says for all of her clients, and she gets paid unbelievable money to work with celebrities and CEO clients around the world. And she tells them all to write on their mirror in the bathroom in the morning, to write on a Post-it note and stick it beside where they're working. This simple sentence: I am enough. And that every time you go into the bathroom, you'll see it on the mirror. I am enough. And then when you see that, you also have to repeat, I have always been enough. And I will always be enough. And I have to tell you, the first time I learned this, I thought, oh, it can't be that easy. It really can't. Can it? But it was worth trying, because what I was dealing with wasn't working. So why not try? And I started putting Post-it notes beside my bed. You are enough. I put it on my bathroom mirror. I am enough. When I'd get out of the shower and there was the fog on the mirror, I would write, I am enough in that fog, and look at that while I was toweling off. I also have it right beside where I'm coming to you from on my couch, my home office, and there's a little piece of paper right beside me that says, actually, let's see if I can pull it over. And, oh, it's taped on there, but hold on, let me grab it. And there it is. I am enough. I've always been enough, and I will always be enough. And I think this is really important because so many of us make a mistake in life, and it could be something terrible. We might have really hurt someone. Or it could be quite simple. We might have failed an exam. No matter what it is, we are more than the sum of our mistakes. We have to be able to forgive ourselves if we ever want to be forgiven. And because of this, no matter what's happened in your life, you need to continue to repeat, I am enough, I've always been enough, and I'll always be enough. The last thing she says, which is really amusing to me and I've enjoyed so much over these last few years, is she says, if there's something that you're doing that you don't want to be doing, how do you get yourself engaged in what that item is? Like, for example, if you are trying to eat a salad every day instead of having junk food, you tell your brain, I'm really looking forward to this salad. I've chosen to eat salad. I'm delighted to eat salad, and I'm going to feel great after I eat salad. And if your brain talks back to you and says, but I want pizza, you talk back to your brain and say, I'm going to feel better after eating salad. After eating pizza, I'm going to be very upset with myself and I'm not going to want to eat for days. So I'm going to eat the salad. And I've chosen to do this and I'm delighted to do this. I use this in the middle of winter when I have a session that I have to present for. And I've got to drive across town or I have to travel in horrible winter weather. And I think to myself, why am I doing this? Why don't I just roll over and go back to bed? So I say to myself, I've chosen to do this and I'm delighted to do this. And I've even used this with my children and I've taught them all of these. In fact, they had to sit down and listen through this presentation with me. And so when there's something happening that we don't want to do, you'll hear the three of us echoing each other's sentiments saying, I'm delighted to do this, even if we're saying it a little bit sarcastically. Surprisingly, it still helps. All right, so I said I'd come back to self-compassion. And there is a professor that I've quoted here, Mark Leary from Duke University. And he basically says that, well, of course, humans, we cause our own negative emotions because we judge ourselves. We're very critical. We have very high expectations. And we have regrets about things we've done. And we always compare ourselves with other people. Now, he asks the same question I asked earlier. Would you treat someone you love as badly as you're treating yourself in a negative situation? Let's say you get a poor performance appraisal at work. How do you treat yourself? What do you say? Do you call yourself, oh, I'm an idiot. How could I not know that? I should have known better. I shouldn't have done that. You're never going to be good enough to do this job. You're an imposter. How did you even get this job in the first place? You're not smart enough for this. You're never going to learn the skills because you're just not good enough. I don't know if anyone else does that kind of thing to themselves, but I used to all the time. Instead, he says, Okay, we are going to reframe that and we're going to say, you're forgiven. And figure out what you're going to learn from it. It might be that you're going to lose that job, but you won't repeat the same mistakes at the next job. Win or learn. It's not win or lose anymore. So in his study, he says that basically when we start using self-compassion, we have more emotional stability. We become more resilient. We're more optimistic in our overall perspective. And most importantly, we report greater life satisfaction. Everyone's always looking for the key to life, the key to happiness. And part of it is right here. All you have to do is be kinder to yourself, and it will also reduce your levels of depression and anxiety. So where did I start? Well, first of all, I found this great meme on Facebook where you see this gentleman sitting on a park bench who's clearly very grumpy and angry, but he's still holding the umbrella over his partner who's sitting at the other end of the park bench. And the wording is, just because you're mad at someone doesn't mean you stop loving them. Well, when you're mad at yourself is how I internalize this. When you're mad at yourself, when someone's being very critical of you, when you're being critical of yourself, you don't stop loving yourself. You have to turn it around and figure out, did I win or did I learn? And what did I learn? And how am I going to apply that moving forward? And there's a Marcus Aurelius quote that says, I, who have never willfully pained another, have no business to pain myself. But I had such high expectations of myself, and other people had such high expectations of me, that I thought I had to be that critical of myself. But I didn't. I could still have goals. I could still be goal-oriented, but I didn't have to do it in a negative way. I could focus on the positive and the rewards I would feel from succeeding. So there I was, feeling quite alone. And this quote came to me. Choose to love. Start with yourself, and others may follow. Part of this, the concept of self-compassion, the concept of win or learn, only works when we recognize a growth mindset. And it was Dr. Carol Dweck who came up with this differentiation between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. So first I'll talk a little bit about a fixed mindset. A fixed mindset is where you don't think you can learn, that your brain is, you either are good at math or you're not good at math. There's no way to improve. And I remember I had a teacher in high school who told me, you'll never go anywhere in math or science. And then I went on to get a doctorate and teach statistics and accounting at the university level. So clearly, this teacher was very wrong, and also never should have said that to a young, impressionable mind. But it happened. So how did I deal with it? If I had a fixed mindset back then, I would have said, okay, I'm bad at math. I'm going to stay away from math courses. But that's not what I did. I said, I'm delighted to do this. I've chosen to do this. And more than anything, I wanted to prove him wrong. And I studied and I studied and I studied and I got help from other people who were doing better in the course. And I succeeded. I got an 81 in that course and felt really quite proud of myself. If I'd had a fixed mindset, I would have just walked away from math and I would have changed my career path. Maybe I would have gone into the arts. I'm not sure. The humanities. But I sure as heck wouldn't have gone through a commerce degree taking calculus and statistics and then ending up teaching statistics eventually. In fact, the reason I was teaching statistics was because I just started my doctorate and I wasn't very good at statistics. And maybe you've heard the adage, the best way to learn something is to teach it to others. So I had the opportunity to teach statistics and used it as an opportunity to learn it really well myself. And that all falls into this concept of a growth mindset, that with the right amount of work, we can get better at anything. Anything. Not just physical things. In this case, I'm talking about mental. Your brain can be trained to become stronger. So in parenting specifically, and also when I'm a manager, I don't focus so much on praising the outcome for my children. I praise instead the effort. I praise the struggle. And I say things like, wow, I'm really impressed with how hard you worked at that. I love seeing when those sweat beads start on your forehead, because then I know you're really thinking hard, and that's amazing. So that's what to praise, not the, oh, you finished that test so quickly, you're so smart, and you got a good mark. Congratulations. If you just praise the outcomes, then when people hit a hard patch, they don't know how to navigate it anymore because they think, I used to get 90s and everything was easy for me. And now I'm not getting 90s. Maybe I'm just bad at this and I'll stop doing it. But you have to do the complete opposite. Focus on the growth mindset, that learning is your goal and effort is the key to unlocking this. Well, I said that your brain is a muscle that you can train. Now, I know a brain isn't actually a muscle, but you can train it. And if we're talking about training muscles, who better than to show a picture of Arnold Schwarzenegger here, who for many years was considered to have the best physique in the entire world. But instead of focusing on our muscles in our body, I want you to think like the Dalai Lama and think about our minds. And what's so fascinating is that there is no limit on our mind. There's no limit to how far we can take our training, our improvements, our gains when it comes to training the mind. The next study I found was one about positive affirmations. And I always love the titles of these research papers, so I included it here for you. Affirmation of personal values buffers neuroendocrine and psychological stress responses. I have no idea what that means. So I read on. And it turns out that what it means is that if we say these positive affirmations, we feel more calm and less defensive. And if we focus on our values, then we'll be happier and healthier and less stressed. So that's pretty important stuff. But what do we do? How do we do that? Here's what I did. First thing I did is I signed up for a quote a day email from a group called dailygood.org. And I found out years later that this email comes from a university in the United States. I believe it's Berkeley. And the quote, no matter what it is, every day, helps me to think about how I could apply that quote to my life. And by doing that, it's always positive and it's always towards your values. And some of the quotes mean a lot more to me than others. And some of them are even in this presentation. But some of the quotes, even if they don't talk to me specifically that day, it gets me thinking about the positive and it gets me thinking about what I value in my life. The second thing that I do, because every day I have to log into my computer, is I turn my password into a positive affirmation. So for example, if the affirmation I want for myself is, I choose to be happy, healthy, and successful. If that's my affirmation, I turn that into the password IC2BHHAS exclamation mark. So that every time I type in the first letter of each of those words and I throw in the number 2 for the word to, so that I have a letter, a number, a special character. So there it is. I type in I, and then the C for choose, and then the number 2 for 2, B for B, H for happy, H for healthy, and A for and S for successful. And then I put an exclamation mark at the end because I really want it to happen. And that's one way of repeating a positive affirmation every day without actually having to say out loud, I choose to be happy, healthy, and successful. Yet another piece of research said that if you say these things out loud, certain things out loud, it will help you find things. So example, anyone who's a wife has typically run into this scenario. Honey, I can't find my keys. Where are my keys? You hear your husband saying this. And you learn as a wife not to reply. And then a couple seconds go by, a couple more, and then you typically hear, forget it, I found them. Because by saying it out loud, it has focused their mind on the task at hand and it helps them find it. So there we go. Vocalizing our thoughts can help us. So I go to a different journal and a different article, and it says how you say things out loud or in your head matters in self-talk. Okay? So I shouldn't just say to myself, I've got this. I can do this presentation. I'm not going to be nervous. Instead, I should reframe it and use the second or third person. What I say to some of the people I'm coaching is I say, okay, pretend there's a radio announcer who's about to talk about your performance going into this presentation. So it sounds a little bit like this. Ladies and gentlemen, Nadine is about to take the stage and she is going to do an amazing job. She is so prepared. She has gone through her slides a dozen times. She's done all the research. She knows all the facts. She is going to knock it out of the park. But hey, if it works, why not try it? And according to the academic research, this will help us in terms of our outcomes. So instead of saying, I've got this, I can do this, I now say, she's going to do a great job. She is so prepared. This almost leads into the next area, which I say is about using your body against your mind. Now, I'm not citing specific research here because it exists in completely different bodies of work. But one of the things they say is you should force a smile to feel better. Now, I'm just going to show you I don't have a pencil, but I do have a pen here handy. And you can play along with me if you've got a pen or pencil near you. And if you put a pen or pencil between your teeth, it looks like you're smiling. It gives your face the feeling that you're smiling. And I can tell you from experience, it is impossible to keep crying when you've got a pencil between your teeth. The other thing some people say is to look in the mirror when you're crying, because it takes your focus off what you're doing or what you're upset about. So if you're looking to try and stop being upset and crying, try putting a pencil between your teeth. The other thing, of course, you can do is go exercise. Any form of exercise, especially if you can get out into nature, releases endorphins, and it improves your mental state. Even if you're studying or you're trying to learn something or you're working on an important final presentation, report, even 15-minute walk in nature or, well, any 15-minute walk can help you focus better when you return. This next image here, though, that has to do with a pencil, but not the one we're going to put between our teeth, is bringing us to the next slide. Basically, it's saying, yesterday, we had a beautiful pencil. We loved this sharp pencil. It was so great. Nice eraser, nice color. And today, somehow the pencil broke. And now we have a choice. Our choice is, how are we going to react to this pencil being broken? Are we going to sit there and play the victim and say, oh, I loved it when my pencil was a whole pencil. That was such a great pencil. My life was so great when I had that pencil. What am I going to do without that pencil? I don't feel complete anymore. It's broken. It's all wrong. It's broken. That's one option. Or you might even be worse, and you might say to yourself, it's my fault. It's my fault the pencil broke. I've ruined everything. I broke the pencil. All of those are one way to react. The alternative is to say, okay, yesterday my pencil was whole, and that was great. It's not whole anymore, though. It is broken. Just acknowledge the facts about the matter. The pencil is broken. Now what am I going to do? You need to move more quickly from the problem to the solution. And in this case, perhaps that solution is to sharpen both ends of the broken pencil. So now you've got two pencils instead of one. This is the idea, and this is the power that we all have between stimulus, something happening, and our response to it. So in this place here, this is where our power lies, to choose how we're going to respond. And this is where another Facebook meme came onto my feed one day that I just fell in love with. And it says, when something goes wrong in your life, just yell, plot twist, and move on. We've all seen movies, television shows, where everything seems to be going great, and then boom, something bad happens. But the characters move forward, and eventually we see redemption after tragedy. So just yell plot twist and start moving towards what's that next page in your life. We could also look at it as this pencil and say, okay, it was broken. Now what am I going to do about it? I'm going to focus on solutions. I'm going to focus on the positive. I'm going to sharpen both ends of the pencil. And now I've got two pencils. And maybe your brain says, yeah, but it's not the big pencil I had before that was so nice. Okay, brain, but since you're going to listen to everything I tell you, good or bad, healthy or unhealthy. Brain, I like this pencil better because now it can fit anywhere. I can put both halves in my pocket easily, and they're not going to fall out, and they're not going to stick out. This pencil is more portable now. That's one way of looking at the pencil. One way of responding to the broken pencil. You don't need to blame yourself about breaking the pencil. Instead, okay, it's broken. I'm going to do my best not to try and break the pencil again. But in the interim, there's things I can do to make my world better. So the question is, why do I have a donut here on the slide as well? Again, this has to do with choosing, after we're prompted with a stimulus, how are we going to choose our response? When I see this donut, I start getting hungry. I start salivating. I see that beautiful glaze, and it is mouth-watering to me. Does anybody think of sugar and sweetness when they see this? Yeah. And I am not sitting there thinking there's a hole in the middle. If you're a negative thinker, when you look at the donut, the first thing you see is the hole in the middle. If you're a positive thinker, you think about, ooh, that's a beautiful, tasty treat, and I can't wait to eat it. And so there's times, in fact, my daughter and I will send back the donut emoji to each other whenever we're going through something challenging. We send the donut emoji, first of all, to mean do not give up or do not give up. And we also send the donut emoji to remind us to focus on the positive. Focus on the donut itself and not the hole in the middle. This next study, I learned a wonderful new word called downward counterfactualization. That's a mouthful. Well, so my question to you is, who is the least happy on the Olympic podium? Who is the least happy? You can type it in the chat and I'll get that answer on my phone. Who is the least happy? Gold medalist, silver medalist, or bronze medalist? What do you think? Okay, one person is written in. Let's have everybody just type in bronze, silver, or gold. Okay, we have 3 responses. Let's have the others. Okay, there's one. There's one. There's one. Okay, great. Let's go with that. We have a whole bunch of people who said, we've got a couple who said bronze, one who said gold, and a few that said silver. Well, let's walk through this. According to this psychology paper, the gold are extremely happy because they've won. They have hit the pinnacle of their career. They are thrilled. They're over the moon excited. They're the best at what they do. Then there's the silver. And the silver person is sitting there thinking, I was so close. If I had just done this, I could have been gold. If I had just tried a little bit harder, had been a little bit better, I would have gotten the gold. Turns out I wasn't good enough to get the gold. If only I had done this. If only this would have been different. And the bronze person is almost as happy as the one with gold, because the bronze person is saying, whew, I almost didn't make it on the podium. I was this close to not making it on the podium. At least I made it on the podium. So in this saga of gold, silver, and bronze, those of you who picked silver as being the most unhappy are correct. Because the silver are ending their sentences with if only. And that is an upward counterfactual. And upward counterfactuals only work to help us try and avoid a certain mistake again in the future. But they don't make us feel any happier about the present. Instead, what you want to be thinking about is downward counterfactuals. And what that means is that you're finishing your sentence after no matter what happened with at least something worse didn't happen. So bronze are saying, at least I didn't end up off the podium. I'm so happy I'm on the podium. They're focused on positivity. Whereas the silver are doing upward counterfactuals and saying, if only. So that's all you have to do in your life. Get rid of the if onlys with at least, and then what's the worst case scenario? And let's apply this. Let's use an academic example for a second. Let's say you get a really bad mark on a report and presentation. And let's say it's because of there was some plagiarism in your work and the professor figured it out. You have two options at this point. You look at your grade and you say, if only I hadn't done that, I'd have a higher grade, which doesn't help your current mood. But on the flip side, what if you say, well, at least she didn't give me a 0 because she has the right to give me a 0 in that scenario. So there you are, and you have the choice between saying something that's going to make you happier right now or something that's going to keep you feeling bad about the current situation. So I suggest using downward counterfactuals and ending your sentences with, at least something worse didn't happen. The second last topic of the presentation, I said I'd bring up worrying and how useful worrying is or isn't. And in terms of worrying, I have these two quotes for you. And basically, we're focusing on the fact that no amount of guilt can change the past, and no amount of worrying can change the future. That worrying is about as effective as trying to solve an algebra equation by chewing bubble gum. And really, that the worst troubles in your life aren't going to happen because of something that you were worrying about. It's actually going to be the type of thing that blindsides you at 4 p.m. on some random Tuesday. So why worry? And instead, think of that song, 80s, 90s, where they say in the lyrics, don't worry, be happy. Because worrying is like sitting in a rocking chair. And you're rocking, and you're rocking, and you're rocking, but you're not getting anywhere. You're not moving. So if what you want to do is to move forward, don't sit on a rocking chair and worry. Instead, focus on the future, on goals, on outcomes. Don't worry about possibilities. Instead, deal with things when they happen. The only caveat to this is, of course, some of us like to plan out the worst case scenario. It's almost like an advanced downward counterfactual. And that we'll say things like, well, if I fail this exam, I'll still get this mark in the course. And then no matter what you get on the exam, you got better than that worst case scenario. And there, that's using downward counterfactuals. Instead of worrying, we focus on positive affirmations. And in my life, I use these two probably the most. I say, be the sunflower. And in this case, that means the sunflower, it turns its head from the morning, the sun's over here, and the flower actually turns towards the sun during the day. It's always focused on the sun. It's always focused on the positive. And that's one way to make sure our faces and our moods stay in the light, is by pretending or being the sunflower. You'll notice in the bottom right-hand corner of each slide, I have me taking a photo in the middle of a sunflower field. They are my favorite flowers, not just for their utter beauty and how amazingly big and robust those flowers can be, how vibrant the yellow is, but the fact that they focus on the positive all day long. And I think that is just truly amazing and a lesson we can all learn from. The other thing that I like in terms of quotes or thoughts for myself is Sir Edmund Hillary, who was the first non-Nepalese man to summit Mount Everest. He said, "It's not the mountain we conquer, but ourselves." And this presentation gives you a lot of ways to think about how can you conquer your own inner mountain. Some of the positive affirmations or the mantras that I use and that I've talked about a little bit throughout the presentation are listed here. The first one, I am enough. And you can continue that with, I've always been enough and I'll always be enough. I am more than the sum of my mistakes. I will succeed or I will learn. I will win or I will learn. And every day is a clean slate where I can be the sunflower, focus on the sun, be positive, focus on the donut and not the hole, and be grateful for what I have and not focused on what I don't have. We know there's going to be bad days. We know there's going to be rain, but you can't get a rainbow without rain. So there's positives that come out of every negative. You are powerful. Your mind is powerful. You have the choice of how you're going to react to everything. And if you apply downward counterfactuals, you will throw at the end of every sentence, it could have been worse. At least this didn't happen. And if we're giving ourselves advice, that advice needs to be clear, concise, have a message, and most importantly, be respectful. So there's nothing going forward that we're going to say to ourselves that we wouldn't tell someone whom we loved. We will be our own cheerleader, and we can say things to ourselves like, she is calm, she is prepared, and she's going to knock this out of the park. Now putting that all into practice, which is kind of like my summary slide. I think I've proven that self-talk is linked to not only your happiness, but also your well-being through resilience and removing stress. So if your brain will listen to what you tell it, be kind, be positive, be compassionate in your self-talk. Know that you're enough and you don't have to be anything but yourself for anyone but yourself. This is your life to live. And there may be expectations put on you by other people, but you are enough. And you don't have to be anything for anyone but you. You can apply positive affirmations by changing your password. You can focus on what you value daily by having a daily quote email, or maybe you want to stick a vinyl quote on your wall, or you want to write something on your mirror. I have a quote above my bed that says, "Maybe we don't have it all together, but together we have it all." And I put this up on my wall after my divorce. And it was a really important reminder that when my kids and I are together, that's all that matters. I don't want to focus on the broken pencil. I want to focus on sharpening both ends of the pencil going forward. I have that ability to choose my response. I can focus on the donut. I can focus on the sun. And with any challenge, I can get better. I have a growth mindset. And if we talk out loud to help yourself cope, it'll help us find things. And if we use the third person, it can help us become less stressed and more resilient. But the important message I'm trying to get across is that it all begins and ends in your mind. So that means that your story and your happiness can start today. You don't have to wait for a class to be done, or exams to be done, or for a trip home, or for a marriage, or a boyfriend, or a child, or a new pet, or a new house, or for your mortgage to be paid off, or to buy a new car. None of these things will bring you lasting happiness. The only thing that can bring you lasting happiness is you making a decision to change the 70% negative self-talk to a much lower number to make you happier, healthier, and more resilient. So I thank you for your attention today. And if you want to stay in touch, you can find me on social media at The Ink Ran on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And I also have a personal website. So that's it for me. And I thank you for your time. I'm just going to stop the recording and then maybe we can have a little chat.